I do see CK as a new paradigm of basically programming, particularly in terms of privacy programming, but also improvable programming.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 32nd episode of Colors of Web3 and Entrepreneurship. My name is Lum, your Web3 host today, as typical. For those of you who are new to the show, Colors of Web3 and Entrepreneurship is a show highlighting the journeys of builders and innovators in Web3 and entrepreneurship. Some topics, especially in Web3, may get technical, but we do our best to keep it accessible for most people. Here I am today. I'm joined by Savio. He is the Noir Product Manager at Aztec. Savio, can you give a quick introduction by yourself?
Of course. Yeah. Great to meet everyone on the show here. Thank you for the invitation, Lam. Honored to be here. I think we actually met in Istanbul, right? During Dev Connect. It was super awesome to meet you back then. Awesome to hear about the show as well. But yeah, I'm Savio, the product manager of Noir, the CK language at the company of Aztec Labs. Noir is basically an open source language for building CK languages. And I've been with the team since 2022-ish. So it's getting into the 2-year mark right now on bringing Noir to the market, bringing Noir to developers' hands to build awesome CK apps, CK projects in general. But yeah, back to you, Ben.
Awesome. Thank you for the cool introduction. Yes, actually, I would like to get to know a bit more about you before you join the Aztec. Maybe can you give us a quick intro about your professional background? Maybe, I mean, you can choose a time frame, whatever you like, maybe from after you graduate from college or your first job or whatever leading to the current position so that we would have a bit of a background.
Yeah, of course. I actually came from a mechanical engineering background. 100% or at least 99% not related to software and not related to blockchain at all. Passion in my previous life was on renewable energy and energy generation itself. So when I was graduating, I actually joined a power utility company back in Hong Kong, working on installing as well as operating, what do we call those? Yeah, gas turbine is how we call those, to power electricity in the power plant back then.
Nice. Were you actually working in the field? Like they're actually installing
at times I was on the project team, so I do quite a bit of planning as well as like organizations as well. But when the installation happens, we all went onto the field to at least see it getting into place, like the gigantic power utility Mitsubishi, the gas turbine. Actually, it was a huge thing to install, and yeah, a lot of people were involved, and yeah, it was awesome. And since then, how did I get into Web3? Yes, I was a huge gamer back then as well. And I literally check out like every game that is launched on a daily basis back then. And one of the games that came across was God. And for some while, I have heard about like Bitcoin, I've heard about like Ethereum, but it's probably not hard to imagine censorship resistant internet free money isn't necessarily a good pitch for gamers. But if you put it behind ERC 721 representing trading cards that you can actually virtually trade in a digital scenario openly on like open marketplaces, and not just only trading, but when the game company, for example, unfortunately bankrupts one day, you can actually bring those on-chain assets and rebuild the whole game, even with more features than it originally had. That's like a perfect pitch for like digital gamers, video gamers. So that was how I got into the field.
Interesting. So was it because of like some trading card games, and then you found about the Web3 technology?
Exactly. So some of the games that I used to play were like Magic the Gathering, Hearthstone. It's pretty fun when you are playing like physical card games that you can actually own cards, trade cards, things like that. But once you bring them into like the video side of things, the digital side of things, oftentimes the company withdraw kind of your ability to trade cards. You don't actually own your cards. If the company decides that, oh, the card doesn't fit this meta, the card could be quote unquote censored once and for all. It's the ranked games for sure. So yeah, you don't actually inherit the ability to own cards, to play your own cards when you're entering like the digital age of trading card games. Gods Unchained in turn is a trading card game that uses 721s to represent the card you own in the game. To be fair, back then it was very early stages. The game was by no means a good game at all. It was super clunky, super buggy. I think it has gotten a lot better these days now. So it's a actually playable, enjoyable game. But back then it wasn't at all. But the idea of them using like 721s to represent cards was super fascinating to me.
When you say back then, what year was this?
It was 29, so not like super long ago, but by like blockchain standard, like it's 4th century ago at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I got into at least the knowledge of Ethereum itself back then, studying more about Web3, studying more about blockchain, went into the rabbit hole, I guess, like everyone else, including you, I would assume. So yeah, learning more about blockchain, and slowly was I realized the lack of is something I don't feel comfortable with regard the usage of like blockchains. Yeah, as your readers or audience might already know, like Ethereum, Bitcoin, everything is fully public. Everything you do is fully public on chain. And it's a good merit for a number of use cases. For example, we might want to hold people accountable in DAOs. We might want to increase transparency in how on-chain organizations, on-chain community works, as well as it provides a lot of auditability to what people are doing on-chain when they need to. But at the same time, we are kind of sacrificing a lot of use cases, if not human rights, that could be both observed as well as actually accomplished on chain that, basically the Web2 worlds rely on, plus all the ages of like human existence rely on with how privacy helps society works, basically. Got into kind of a bit of privacy pilled / CK pilled, as CK was the prominent and is the prominent technology to enable privacy these days. So started studying a bit more about CK, got into CK actually through Harmony's CK DAO. It's no longer a project now because of the bear market back then, so they closed it down, but super grateful when the community existed, where people are teaching each other how Circom works, how CK development works. And we are all brainstorming as well as hacking with different like CK projects.
Was Harmony ZK DAO related to the Harmony blockchain in some way?
Yes, it was funded by the Harmony blockchain as a like CK study club where people gather and learn about CK development. That then transitioned to my full-time role in the Noir side of things in Aztec Labs. And that's how the journey came together. Sorry for this super long, boring story. But that's the rough background.
Good. Interesting. Yeah, I see. So you begin from the video game. So I think, what about now? Are those video games still what keep you interested in the technology?
For a while, I was too occupied with learning about blockchains. But I do think we are definitely planning to pick up a bit more on the gaming side of things. I do think on-chain gaming could be a very interesting aspect of cutting into how, or at least introducing blockchain to a lot of like different people that might not have learned about blockchain. As in, on-chain gaming is a great way to not only power open source and community-owned games, but at the same time, it accomplishes something that is very hard to accomplish in traditional world, which is server-side modding of games. So when we are coming to like multiplayer games in the traditional sense, oftentimes companies are the one that control the development of games. And people might have, or players might have the ability to tweak things, tweak like textures, tweak like some objects on the client side, where they can somehow improve the experience, but it's very difficult to do it at a multiplayer scale of like, for example, changing things on the server side, changing things, game mechanics or principles on the server side to basically enable a lot of different features in games. And on-chain gaming, I do see it being a possible path towards growing that sense of ownership as well as that sense of development regarding games. That being said, it's a very good tie-up with privacy, as in a lot of game mechanics actually rely on privacy if you think about it. For example, I'm not sure if you have played, not necessarily Hearthstone, but actually any card games, maybe poker even, you can't actually review your whole hand to your opponent if you are playing a game of poker. That wouldn't work at all. It basically breaks the game. So that by itself is actually a like showcase of how privacy is useful in games. It also applies to, for example, Among Us. If you have played it, if people aren't able to like hide their role in the game, always showcasing that I'm the imposter out of the game, then there's no fun at all playing Among Us. So a lot of games actually rely on like privacy components, and it's like a perfect tie-in of what we are working on in CK, what we are building with Noir, to introduce those mechanisms back into game designs when it comes to on-chain gaming to power like the perfect holy grail of game design. So yeah, definitely thinking more about games these days as well.
Cool. Yeah. So I have actually played the I'm sure you probably know the card game Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Yu-Gi-Oh. So I don't think there's a Web3 version of that, but I actually have played the Web3 version, not the Yu-Gi-Oh, but another company who make the card game. I don't know if they actually use ZK technology or not, but yeah, the idea is I think I play with another person, right? You cannot see their card. But yeah, we take turn one by one and then just pass out the card. And the objective is to defeat the opponent once they run out of the hit points or the health points, and they will lose, right? But yeah, there's some rules, mechanics as well. Yeah, it's quite exciting. I do think there's potential there for ZK to be applied in those games.
That's super cool. You would definitely have to send the name to me so I can check the game out.
Sure, yeah, I can't record, but yeah, let me send it to you afterward. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting game. One question before we deep dive into your company. Maybe can you share with us what are your hobbies these days besides Web3?
Well, that's a good question. My hobbies are actually CK and cryptography, but jokes aside, I think a lot of my time spent these days are simply catching up with friends at different occasions, because I was originally from Hong Kong, but recently moved to Toronto. Fortunately and gladly, a lot of my friends actually moved here a few years back, since like 2018, 2019-ish. So it's just a great chance to utilize this, I guess, short period to catch up with all the friends that I have in Toronto, not just from Hong Kong, but also from other places as well, particularly with like, a lot of great events. Oh, actually, blockchain events happening in Toronto as well. RWC on cryptography happened earlier this year. ETH Toronto is coming up. So it's just great to like catch up with folks, hang out with folks on different occasions, like casual sports, cinema. Sometimes it's just a meal, but catching up with friends is just awesome.
Nice, awesome. Yeah, I actually I've heard and read that Toronto is one of like the original places for a lot of the Web3 event, like even the Bitcoin Essential meetup, right? So actually on my what episode? I think episode 26, when I have my Trevor Koveric, I'll probably leave a link up here. He's like the founder of an AI based company right now. But yeah, he's I think also from Toronto. He attended one of the first like, Bitcoin meetups. It was like 10, 11 years ago, and it was very nascent when even like, Ethereum was still in the very early days, when Vitalik was still attending the Bitcoin meetup and trying to get the traction moving with his Ethereum as a project. Yeah, so it was very interesting. Yeah, so I do think that Toronto is a very exciting city for Web3 to be in, for sure. A lot of activity.
100%. There are a lot of great crypto and blockchain people here. And if anyone listening is in Toronto, definitely feel free to ping me. I have no idea where my Telegram would be, but I'm somewhere here. So yeah, definitely ping me. Would love to catch up.
Awesome. Yeah, make sure to put your Telegram here, people to link up. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and deep dive into your current company. Feel free to share with us any presentation or documents that you have.
Of course. Yeah. So the company that I'm working in is Aztec Labs, as you can see. So the company-wide itself, a lot of its focus is actually focused on building the layer 2 itself. Let me try to bring up the company web page to make this less dry. So our company is super focused into bringing privacy first blockchain into the space. Our previous works was on, if people had the experience, CK Money and Aztec Connect, which was a CK layer 2 that enables people to group funds and bridge them as well as interact them with L1 DeFi protocols. So people were actually, for example, swapping assets on the L2 through L1 Uniswap. People were what else? And investing from L2, depositing into L1 Lido, L1 staked ETH, etc., etc. So that was our previous product built by our bigger team. Right now, the entire team or the large team is focusing on R&Ding the end game of Aztec, which is a programmable version of that privacy blockchain. It's not just about bridging funds from L2 to L1, but you can actually build out full-fledged CK dApps on the L2 itself with full programmability to interact with like private as well as public states. And in extension to that team, our team that works on Noir is actually building a fully open source and general purpose CK language that dates back a lot in terms of history. When the original team was building Aztec, building basically the CK technology, a huge difficulty as well as huge bottleneck towards that as how difficult it is to actually write in CK, to develop things in CK. So back then, Joe and Zach, who were the original founders of Aztec, got into touch with Kev, who was our lead engineer on Noir itself. And they started basically the project of Noir to build out a easy-to-use Rust-like language for building out CK proofs, for building out CK programs. And that's how Noir started in its infancy stage. And as it grows, it's turning into what we call a general purpose language, as in it doesn't only do things on blockchain. So oftentimes we're hearing about CK and blockchain in the same conversation. It could be confusing. We can go into that later on for sure. But then there are a lot of use cases that CK could unlock in the Web2 sense as well, in the off-chain sense as well, in terms of, for example, identity, in terms of governance. So a huge goal for Noir itself is to be a credible, neutral public good that everyone can actually make use of, not just useful for Aztec, not just useful for CK on blockchain, but also for CK as a whole in both Web2 and Web3 contexts. So that's what brought us into bringing Noir into existence, as well as growing it in terms of features, but also more importantly, in terms of ecosystem, to onboard more people writing in Noir, building CK dApps, shining off CK's innovation as well as values, bringing them into the masses.
So when the one word I saw on the document, the domain specific language, does that bring any particular meaning? Like it's only work in Web3, for example?
So domain specific language, in this case specifically, is Noir is a language for building provable programs with CK itself. So albeit it being able to do like normal program execution, normal program computation, we definitely don't boast it as like our value. It's more of a handy tool that when people need to use, they can use that. But if you want to do like hyper efficient general computation, Rust, Python, JavaScript, whatever your like general programming language choice could help. In this case, Noir is super good at doing CK provable programs itself, which is what brings into the name as a DSL.
I see. And then Snack, do you have a very simple explanation for Snack?
Yeah, a lot of technical terms on the doc page itself for sure.
There's a lot there.
So when we are talking about CK or zero knowledge, or more accurately, actually zero knowledge proof as a like umbrella technology, there are a lot of different ways of achieving zero knowledge proofs. There were Graph 16 proofs back then, and then there came Plonk proving systems, and then the Starknet team came up with Stark, things like that. And Snark is like one category of proof, CK proof itself. Particularly Plonk proofs are an example of like Snark proofs. So it's basically, one of the categories underneath the entire CKP umbrella.
I see. So people basically have the different option to choose from, right? Yeah.
For sure. And to be honest, at this point, it only works with Snark proving systems, but Noir aims to be a fully arbitrary as well as fully cross-functionable language with different proving backends. So there are teams already working on, for example, integrating stock proving systems, integrating Groth16 proving systems with Noir. So treat this as a perhaps even outdated doc page on only supporting SNOC systems at this point.
Cool. I see. Yeah. Is there any why is there a mountain on Noir there? Is there something related to on that picture? Just curious.
Oh, you mean why are there mountains in the picture itself?
Yes.
I have no idea. Our design team came up
Just
with
for
it. It's
design.
super
Okay.
cool. Yeah, it's super cool,
Yeah, I
so
just
we
noticed
used it.
that
But yeah,
somehow
no
resembling me of
particular.
like Mount Fuji. Maybe I don't know. They have anything.
I
Yeah.
wish we should definitely have Mount Fuji in it.
Yeah. Cool. So basically, you are in charge of this language, right? This would be like your main like.
Yeah, so
building
I
up.
work a lot with the engineering team itself to make sure we are working towards the goals we want to achieve, the priorities we want to achieve. At the same time, I do a lot of coordinations with the Aztec team as well, because we are not only building Noir for external people to use, but we ourselves in Aztec Labs are definitely making use of the language itself as well. So oftentimes I have to chat a lot with the Aztec teams to know what are their needs, what are their goals they need to achieve, and how we can cooperate together to bring things into existence. But oftentimes I also need to coordinate with the commercial team. So engineering team might be very well in executing the technical features, bug fixes, whatever feature requests that we are coming along. But then commercial team is what brings things into market, as in announcements, as in ecosystem collaborations, partnerships, community growth, feedback gathering as well. So a lot of times I have to work with the commercial team to funnel things into the public, as well as funnel things back into the tech stack itself. And yeah, a lot of, of course, user feedback sessions, talking with users, talking with our partners as well. So basically juggled between a lot of different teams within the company as well as with the community.
I see. So more like an information hub in a way, right? Because I think that's quite typical for product manager as well, being
100%.
information hub. But yeah, I think probably be a good idea maybe if you can give some more background info into the company itself. Aztec, right?
Oh yeah,
Aztec. Yeah, I think that would be helpful for people to understand like what is
of
the
course.
goals of
Of course.
Aztec, what people doing, and then
Yeah. So this would be a test of my memory, because Zach and Joe would definitely know more. Zach and Joe are the original founders of Aztec Labs itself. I believe they originally founded this not actually under the name of Aztec, but under the name of Credit Mint, where they were actually doing institutional loans brought on chain, kind of financial application. And through that project itself, they discovered the need to bring privacy on chain, as in a lot of companies were very reluctant, as well as I believe are very reluctant these days, to bring things on chain, as in it exposes everything they do on chain, which doesn't necessarily help them kind of guarding themselves from their, for example, competitors, or for whatever reasons that might risk their business strategy. So since then, they've pivoted towards working more under the privacy focus, as well as aiming for privacy first always to bring things on chain, which led them to Aztec V1, which is kind of similar to Zcash, if you know about it, or maybe Tornado Cash, by the slightly worsened reputation these days. But basically bringing private transactions on chain was a huge goal for Aztec V1. They brought it through the technology of CK plus as a CK rollup, to minimize the guesses which users have to burden themselves with when they are interacting with private payments. The Aztec V1 was the huge unlock of bringing private transactions on Ethereum, which then brings into Aztec V2, which was the Aztec Connect / CK Money that I was mentioning about. It's not just about private payments on an L2 anymore, but it also enables the ability for people to interact with L1 dApps through the L2 itself. It's super cool when you actually think about it, about pooling funds and investing in L1 protocols, or interacting with L1 protocols through an L2 itself, which you are paying only like cents in fees, but at the same time you also get privacy of doing things on L1. So that was Aztec V2, which unfortunately we had to sunset the protocol. And a lot of people was guessing because of regulations, but it was actually more about research and engineering bandwidth, since we're aiming for what we internally call Aztec V3, but basically Aztec, the ultimate fission itself, the fully programmable private public hybrid state L2 that we will be bringing into the market. And as it turns out to be, it takes a lot of effort into R&Ding that full fission. Privacy is not an easy thing to do at all. So it requires a lot of bandwidth from both the engineering team as well as the cryptography team to actually achieve this vision that we have. Yeah. Since then, we had to shut down Aztec Connect and leave it to the community to run the sequencer if they wish to run withdrawing nodes if they wish to. It's fully decentralized. If people would love to withdraw these days, they can definitely do that still, even with our machines turned off. But yeah, that was how we transitioned from Aztec V2 all the way to the ultimate Aztec that we are currently aiming for.
I see. Interesting. So would you say that Aztec is more like a research and development organization, or is there any particular products that the company, or products, or I guess like tools or things that companies are commercializing? I think earlier you mentioned there's a commercial team, right? So I'm just wondering, is there like a commercial aspect of it to the company?
Yeah, our company would be more accurately framed as an infrastructural company, basically, because our goal is to first and foremost bring L2 into existence that supports private states. And, that alone is a lot of work. So to be fair, I have no idea how we could manage building our products on the chain itself as well. So we definitely need to onboard like a lot of partners to build out different components for the chain itself. On the infrastructure side, we would definitely need partners and I think we're working with partners as well and looking for partners to build out, for example, block explorers, for example, wallets, for example, blockchain nodes, a lot of like basic infrastructure for a blockchain to work. We're looking for partners to work those out.
This would be a layer 2 for Aztec?
Yes, I should have been more accurate. Okay. Yes, it's a layer 2 on Ethereum. We are basically aiming for Ethereum, but private. That is achievable with CKPs. And so, yeah, we need a lot of like blockchain infrastructural partners. And at the same time, we're also both working with as well as looking for projects to be built both on Aztec, but in my case, also on Noir itself. For example, we are working with a lot of dev tooling teams, library teams to build out some of the primitives that enables people to build with Noir, enables people to build with Aztec. And at the same time, there are also a lot of projects building with Noir and soon on Aztec that crosses different aspects of things. There are gaming projects that are working with us. There are identity projects that are working with us. There are governance projects that are working with us. Happy to share more on that as well. But yeah, that's roughly how I guess the commercial team come together as well as bring things to the market. And the one line aim for Aztec is to bring private Ethereum into existence. As in Ethereum itself is a censorship resistance, very secure, very decentralized layer 1 that we fortunately have today. And Aztec is the last component of bringing privacy to that mix and making sure we achieve all those qualities under the same umbrella with Aztec.
I see. When you say private, I think this is a part that probably most people are quite curious about. I think as we both know that most of the information on the blockchain is basically, well, it's on the blockchain, right? And then everybody can see. Of course, you don't know who the wallet address is unless if you have a label or something like that, or you don't know who the wallet address is. But now there's also like detective tool to help you discover and investigate after a lot of the bad things that happen, right? I think there's even teams who specialize in like chain analysis, for example. So what sort of privacy are we referring to here on the blockchain? Just give us like maybe compare and contrast that with another.
Yeah, that's a very good question. When people think about privacy, oftentimes people think about it's either private or it's fully public, which is kind of the sense when it comes to blockchain. But when we take a step back and look into how privacy works in, for example, Web 2 or even, for example, pre-Web stages, privacy is always a spectrum of things, and a lot of different things can actually lie between that spectrum. At one end, things are like fully anonymous. I don't know your name. I don't know your face. I don't know your voice. I'm only reading words that you might have typed that you could maybe even mix up depending on your writing style to hide your original personality as well as hide your personal writing styles. That's like the fully anonymous route. And then there's the fully public route, which is quite similar to what we are doing with blockchains today, Ethereum, Bitcoin. There's maybe somewhat pseudonymity with wallets that comes into the mix, but basically everything is public, everything is transparent, everyone can read everything that happens on chain. But there are actually a lot of different things in between that can be achieved when we think about how things work in, for example, Web2. So as an example, if I'm sending an email to you using, for example, Gmail, I would be expecting you and me, myself, would be able to read the email. Maybe Google could be able to read that as well. I could be hand
I'm
wavy
sure
for
Google
that.
can read it. I'm pretty sure Google can read it. Yeah.
100%. But then I would not be expecting, for example, my parents would be able to read that, or my friends would be able to read that. So that actually is a kind of a pseudo middle point within the privacy spectrum where not everything is transparent. Of course, there are people that I don't expect them to be able to read the email, but at the same point, it's not like fully end-to-end encrypted as well, where Google might be able to read it to provide some kind of feature. And when we are talking about like a privacy first layer 2, when it comes to Aztec, it's about opening up that full spectrum of possibilities where people can work with. It's not about encrypting and making everything private if people don't want to. A huge part of like Aztec's offering is to offer both private states as well as public states. So people can, developers basically, can basically choose what are they turning into private things, what are they turning into public information. So for example, when we were discussing about how public chains or transparent chains are useful for accountability, when you're building, for example, a DAO or Aztec itself, it might be useful to have like delegators or governors votes be a public value that exists on the chain itself. But you might not be wanting to review, for example, certain secret strategies that people are planning with the DAOs, or certain, for example, unreleased mergers that are happening in the scene to be a public value that exists on chain. Aztec is about offering that spectrum of possibilities for people to pick and choose where they want to achieve with their product on the privacy spectrum.
I see. So basically giving people the choice, right, to basically create a customization application solution, I would say, suppose. That's interesting.
Yeah,
So
that
then,
comes a lot. Sorry to interrupt.
oh, okay. So then would it say that there's a lot of the characteristics that's already built in at the infra layer for the Aztec blockchain that enable apps to do this? Would you say? Like what are some of those? And if
Yeah, definitely. So in the traditional sense, or actually the current sense of building a CK dApp on chain or a CK private application on chain, a huge part of it comes to how you manage those private states and private data that is being stored on chain. Because Ethereum itself, by default, doesn't support any like private information being stored on there.
Yeah.
And how do you actually achieve that state structure is something that Aztec brings a lot into the mix. Let me see if I can find this slide to make things easier.
Sure.
So a lot of times when we're talking about how data is being stored on chain, they are stored in a somehow Merkle tree or a tree-like structure where data are more easily achievable or retrievable on chain. And when it comes to the Ethereum layer 1 itself, or basically any EVMs or transparent chains itself, a lot of times they only have one Merkle tree that supports public state storage, and that's basically all. You can store things on there, you can retrieve things from there, but then everything is public, everything is transparent, and a huge offering of Aztec, the network itself, is having built-in private state trees as well as what we call nullifiers as well. I can explain more about that. But basically a tree structure, data structure that enables the storage of private information as well. It might sound very easily achievable or very simple. It's basically another tree storing different data, no? But then when we really think about how private states are used, then things get a bit more complicated. So when we have a private state tree on Aztec So when we have a private state tree on Aztec itself, we also have to think about how do we actually change values on the tree. So if things are fully public, Lam is transferring 1 ETH to me, it's very easy to simply tweak Lam's account balance on chain and call it a day. Everyone knows what's happening, everything's good. But when it comes to private Lam, how does Lam actually prove that, first of all, he owns a ETH on the chain itself? And secondly, how do we actually nullify that ETH that Lam uses and transfer to me to avoid Lam being able to double spend the ETH when it comes to later dates? So when we have to consider that part of engineering itself, we then have to introduce yet another thing called nullifier, which is tied to the ETH or to the, what we call it, nodes that people are spending on chain. And that itself then helps not necessarily revealing which node or which data that Lam is altering or spending, because that data could be kept untouched on the private storage tree that we have. But simply adding a nullifier that is tied to that node itself, but that nullifier doesn't necessarily reveal any information unless you are the one generating it. So this then requires yet another tree for nullifiers, which then helps tie things together. And this private data tree plus nullifier tree is only about spending an ETH so far as a UTXO structure. And when we think about like general programmability, if people have different data models that might not necessarily be representable just as an ETH, maybe people would like to mint their own tokens. Maybe people would like to add storage values of how things are operating in the dApps. Then that whole picture becomes a lot more complicated. And Aztec is how offering all those at the infrastructural layer to make things a lot easier to program with, to make things a lot easier to write with.
I see. A nullifier, just to maybe keep it simple for people who may be watching, would you say that a nullifier is like a Boolean structure in a way? Like a Boolean structure?
It's actually a hash, usually a hash of the original value that people are spending. For non-developers out there, hash is basically a one-way function or a one-way, you can imagine it as a one-way tunnel for an X value to become a certain Y value. But then this relationship is always one-to-one, as in X would always lead to Y. And how that's useful is you can then use the original data, hash it, and it becomes a nullifying value. And whenever people would love to make use of that original value again, they would have to be able to generate a nullifier that doesn't already exist in order to prove that this value was not modified previously. If they are generating a nullifier that already existed, then Aztec network would basically reject their transaction. And that's the private way of achieving double spend avoidance.
I see. Oh, wow, it's more complicated than I thought. Yeah. Earlier you mentioned that UTXO is a UTXO also property of the Aztec blockchain as well. So instead of like
Yes.
a state account, UTXO. Okay. So I've actually I've seen UTXO utilized in the Bitcoin blockchain, right? Bitcoin. I mean, it's a UTXO model. So why does Aztec use this UTXO model?
Yeah, that's a very good question. With all the years of like CK plus privacy research and development throughout the years since Bitcoin came out like 2008, UTXO turned out to be the supreme data structure when it comes to private state storage, basically. Because UTXO has a good property of splitting things up into individual nodes rather than an account state that you modify. And that particular property of UTXO is very helpful in protecting or avoiding people to detect changes in the individual nodes while making them usable in some way. So when I was talking about like private data and nullifier, a good part of it with UTXOs is that when people are modifying a certain private state in the tree itself, in the UTXO tree itself, it doesn't necessarily modify all the other things that might be linked to it. And in that case, people then can handpick selected nodes that they own to perform certain transactions or things they want to use. For example, I own, 1 ETH but at the same time, I might have some USDC as well as DAI on my balance as well. If I'm only spending that ETH, I will only be nullifying that ETH on the nullifying tree, but I don't necessarily need to touch like USDC, touch DAI, which versus the account model, albeit there's also a tree structure within, but then you always have to link it up to the same account when you're doing changes. And if you're linking up to the same account, then that reveals which account is actually operating those functions, performing those functions, which to some extent leaks privacy. So UTXO is a good way of separating that relationship between who is doing what to basically perform robust and ultimate privacy for users.
I see. So for example, maybe let's just go with another simple example. If user have like one ETH, right? Let's say you have one ETH, and then so every time when you spend some ETH, maybe let's just say you spend 0.1 ETH from buying some NFT or something, and then would it have like multiple unspent transaction output? Is that right? Or the UTXO? So you have more than one, right? Just to make it clear for the viewers.
Yes, exactly. So that's how Bitcoin somehow achieve privacy as well. As in, some people might advocate for Bitcoin having better privacy than Ethereum. As in, when you're receiving like different quote unquote notes of Bitcoin or basically different values of Bitcoin into your account, they aren't actually merged into the same account or related to the same account at all. As long as you leave them untouched and spend them like individually, they don't necessarily link back to the original wallet owner or the account owner when people are spending those Bitcoins. So to some extent, albeit everything happening in Bitcoin is fully public, fully transparent, if you're very stringent about how you are spending your nodes and manage your nodes, then you could actually achieve somewhat privacy on Bitcoin itself as well. And that's like the property that UTXO offers that account models doesn't necessarily do.
Interesting. But then wouldn't when you spend something even on Aztec blockchain, when you buy something, it will probably show, when you look on the blockchain explorer, it will show your wallet address originating where it originated from, right? And then where it's heading to. So
that's So the fun part of it is it's still in R&D right now, but at the same time, we have jokingly talked about we're doing something happening blockchain explorer that doesn't actually show a lot of information. Maybe wallet address would be a part of it, but maybe not as well. As in, if you are the transaction owner or the originator of the transaction, you know everything about the transaction itself, then you can definitely decrypt things that are happening related to you on chain through the Explorer, through, for example, a signature from your wallet, for example, certain private key or passwords from your wallet, which then unlocks you to basically decrypt everything that happens related to you. For example, transactions being sent to you, for example, transactions that you are sending to others, how much are you sending, things like that. But then to external people, the block explorer will simply be a something happened page where someone at the time itself would be public for sure, but someone did something on this chain with some depths that you don't necessarily know what they are if things are fully private when the developers is designing that depth.
So the values will be masked. Values will be masked.
Yeah,
or something
basically
like
everything is encrypted, and it would be a fun explorer versus the other explorers that we have today, where people can view everything. And I can imagine a lot of people finding fun as well as confusion from that when it comes to existence.
Interesting. Yeah, actually, just want to make a quick comment about that. So on my episode 27, I talked to the co-founder Inmax. Inmax is like also a layer 2 on Ethereum. They're using Plasma as like the scaling solution, right? And then they basically trying to achieve like total privacy in a way. I think it's like very extreme. It's like stateless layer 2. So there's no like account base, like no UTXO, right? No states on there. And I believe the blockchain explorer on the testnet, because the mainnet's not out yet. I'll leave a link to the episode up here anyway. Yeah, you can't really see anything on there because you don't have like states, right? So I believe that's probably maybe a good reference point for you to look into as well. I feel like it's somewhere, it's like so Ethereum is more like the open, like Intback is like completely like private by nature, and then yours Aztec Like blockchain is somewhere in the middle, right? I feel like, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I would definitely have to check Inmax out. I remember reading some of their early research papers, but it's been a while since I revisited the project. So yeah, would love to catch up on how things are going on there and for sure.
Yeah, certainly. I think they probably planning to do the mainnet again later this year. I think that's
Super cool.
anyway. Yeah, cool. Anyway, so maybe actually would like to touch upon the human side of things for Aztec, and then just to understand how many people work in Aztec right now.
Wow, there are a lot of people joining, so I've lost count. But if I would have to guess, it's probably 60-ish. Last I heard was like 50-ish, but a few people onboarded since then, so maybe 60-ish now.
Okay, so 50, 60. How many would you say are in like engineering, and how many other
Oh
product owner
yeah,
like you? Yeah.
a lot actually. I think around 40 to 50 is in engineering if we count cryptography in, because we do have a pretty sizable cryptography team that works on Plonk technologies. We're working towards Honk now, but basically the proving stack that we are using for Aztec itself, as well as exposing it for Noir users. So we have a somewhat big cryptography team, and then we have a huge engineering team that works on Aztec as well. And then we have a moderately sized Noir team that contributes to Noir the language. And we have a like 10 people-ish commercial team / operation teams that help bridge things together. We're definitely growing that team for now. But yeah, that's roughly where things are at these days.
Cool. Yeah. And how many product manager are there beside you in Aztec?
On the product team, we have Joe is on the product team as well as the chief product manager. And then there's me, there's Rahul, and there's Cooper. So there's 4 of us on the product team.
Cool. What are the other products that they are managing? The other PM?
So Joe oversees everything product and basically everything happening in the company itself, to be fair, because he was founding the company with Zach. And then Rahul is focusing on Aztec NR / the execution environments of Aztec. So a brief like context on where our technology stack lies, or it's like the general purpose language that powers everything Web 2 and Web 3, and how people actually write smart contracts on Aztec itself is through the framework that we call Aztec NR, Aztec.nr to be fair. It's a library and extension that is basically built upon Noir that offers all the functionality that I mentioned just now regarding like private states, UTXOs, nodes, nullifiers, things like that. Aztec NR provides like great APIs as well as basically an SDK for people to interact with those things. And then it leads to like the Aztec infrastructure or the underlying network itself that people usually build with. Aztec NR is the framework that people use this, and Rahul oversees that part of the framework as well as the execution environment of the tech stack itself that makes use of people's code built with that framework and translate that into actionable, executable code in the Aztec network itself. So Rahul oversees that part of the tech stack, and Cooper is primarily focusing on the decentralization of the network itself. So everything related to decentralization falls into his pocket. He does a lot of public research in terms of, for example, network infrastructure. How should we be building nodes? How should we be cooperating with partners to build out those infrastructure to bring decentralization into place? He's also working a lot with engineers plus external partners on, for example, governance systems. How should portals or bridges be built with Aztec? How should the network itself be upgradable? Things like that. There's actually a great Aztec forum that I can briefly show.
Sure. Is this like the forum where people do the governance as well for Aztec, right? Any
Yes. Well,
governance
since
related?
we don't have a network right now, there isn't any governance in place. But there are a lot of public research happening in the forum regarding how governance should be taking place for sure. Oh, also Fernet is on sequencers of the network, and there are also discussions around Prover itself. So one thing I do admire as well as respect Cooper for is he's always going for research in public first. So a huge part of Aztec itself is we are doing everything in public. We are building in public everything that I talked about just now, not just Noir, but also the full Aztec tech stack. everything is open source on GitHub, so people can not only check the code but also contribute it if they wish to. But then when it comes to things beyond coding, things usually are kept more secretive or private. And Cooper is a great leader, I would say, within the company that brings the research part of the equation also into the public land, as in setting up the forum. We're doing all sorts of proposal seekings, requests for proposals, requests for like research articles, research efforts, research initiatives. Everything is publicly discussed as well as listed on the forum itself. So if anyone listening here is for example, network enthusiast that is interested in how blockchain networks work, how L2s should behave, how even CK rollups should be governed, then I would highly recommend our forum to be a resource to check out. There are a lot of different teams chiming in, not just our engineers, but also like internal researchers, but external researchers, plus external project teams, like the math team, like the Ethereum Foundation team. Yeah, a lot of different people are chiming in here to bring things into existence.
Nice, I see. Yeah, so there's quite a lot of things going on there from what I can see. Yeah, for sure. Always. Maybe one thing would be quite interesting for a lot of not user, but for the viewers to know is that what is a day-to-day life in the life of a product manager at a Web3 very technical oriented company, because I'm pretty sure that Aztec is more technical than many other Web3 company out there.
I would love to hear your product experience as well. For me, myself, it's a lot of context switching to begin with. So when people are coming from like engineering perspective, or maybe even certain commercial perspective, a day-to-day life could be very focused on maybe one or even two initiatives for your entire day. For example, if I'm an engineer, I can probably only touch like two main code files throughout the entirety of the day, if that's my focus work for that day. For product manager, we don't necessarily get that. I wouldn't want to say privilege, because I do at times enjoy the context switching and meeting the different challenges within the same day. But there are definitely a lot of things to hop through when it comes to product life. We have to talk a lot with engineers in terms of like priorities, in terms of plannings. We have to talk a lot with commercial folks on same thing, plannings, priorities. But then we also have to spend a lot of time talking with users to actually understand what users' needs are, what users are building, how do we better enable them to achieve what they want to achieve. So at the same time, also we have to talk a lot with like partners that helps build things in our tech stack, contributing to the tech stack, as well as building projects in general. So if I do have to count, I would say at minimum, usually a day involves at least 10 context switching between meetings, between reading code, between writing issues, between hopping on Slack, between hopping on Telegram, Discord, chatting with communities there. So yeah, it's a lot of different things in the mix on both technical and commercial side. And to be fair, I do enjoy it at times. And there are ways to mitigate that as well. For example, I can block out times for a certain project that I want to work on. But then when it comes to day-to-day, it's always about talking with people as well as making sure priorities are right for the entire team, for the entire company to achieve what we set out to achieve. Yeah.
I see. Cool. Yeah. I think I figure, context switching is, I think, quite common for a lot of product management, right? Because if you're acting as like the hub for information from multiple departments, right? Like you said, the commercial department, engineering, and a bunch of other external partners as well, then I feel like context switching is actually quite common over there.
Yeah, I would say it's a main ask for product managers as well to the intention is not to context switch, but it's to stay on top of most things, if not everything that is happening on both technical, commercial, external sides, to make sure you have a clear vision as well as understanding of where the product is at, which then helps you to deduce will be at of the product from all the information that you are gathering. You can then do the decision making and accurate decision making on what should the teams be prioritizing, what should we be aiming for as goals, in what time frame, to maximize the impact of your product, basically, in the people's hands.
Yeah, which I think lead me perfectly to the next relevant question here for as a product manager, how do you actually prioritize different features? Because there will always be like multiple features or multiple requests coming in, right? But your time is limited. Not only your time, but also your engineering team time is limited, right? Engineering resources are always a scarcity in any tech company, as far as I know. How do you actually prioritize for that? Like what feature to view and what activities to do?
For sure, for sure. So let's scope this discussion first at engineering priorities, because I do think like commercial or partnership priorities, that's a whole different paradigm.
Yeah.
But for engineering priorities particularly, we do rely on a very robust GitHub issue template, basically. I'm usually hated for this, but we usually don't cater for anything unless it's a GitHub issue to begin with, because we have set up a very good template that not only ask for what the problem is, for example, what people would like to achieve, but also a bit of context on, for example, how is that affecting people's work? As in, for example, if it's a bug that is blocking your project, that's a good section where people can be filling in as in, oh, this is blocking my certain project, hence it should be raised in terms of priorities, in terms of importance. Or if it's simply I do appreciate the community to be very honest here, and at times things might simply be nice to have that could improve people's life for sure, but it's not necessarily blocking the projects. So people would be keying that in as the additional context on the template itself as well. And with that great foundation of template setup, when it comes to feature requests, when it comes to bug reports, things like that, and then me and the engineering lead could then simply go through the new issues that we are receiving and give them ratings in terms of priority, in terms of engineering scope that we're estimating, how much time would this particular issue take in terms of engineering time. Then we can consider it as a whole with the whole picture of the entire backlog in terms of priority, in terms of how much bandwidth do we have on a per sprint basis, and then handpick the tasks that we would love to achieve for the particular sprint itself. This is only on like sprint planning, which spends like 2 weeks max. But then this also comes umbrellaed under the quarterly planning that we're doing, which involves more than just engineering, more so with the entirety of product team, but also the commercial team to line out basically what are the high level goals we want to achieve within the quarter itself, or maybe even a half-yearly basis or even a yearly basis, depending on the scope that we are planning for. But that would be the high-level goals that are guiding the things we are doing on a per sprint basis. Like how are we actually rating those priorities? It's not just about if it's blocking people's project, but also about if they are leading towards the long-term company goals that we are lining out for the product itself. So yeah, there's the long-time planning, there's the short-time planning, which is very powerfully powered by the robust GitHub issue templates and my annoying passion as well as restriction to force people going through GitHub issues whenever they come with ideas.
I see. Yeah, no, but I think having some sort of structure would certainly help, right? Because if you just submit like whatever random format, it doesn't. Yeah, but you want to be able to. I guess like what I'm trying to say, you have to be able to compare apples to apples, right? You can't really compare an apple to an orange, or if an issue is like something, but maybe with very little detail and doesn't provide the context and enough information, then you can't really make the final decision, right? And I think you said earlier, was it just usually the product manager along with the engineering manager who make the final decision on whether to implement a feature, or is it more like a group
Yeah, we don't have a officially titled engineering manager, but every engineering team do have an engineering team lead that leads the team, as well as coordinate the technical work that needs to be achieved. When I mentioned like me, myself as a product manager and the engineering team lead would come together and discuss priorities, it's a huge useful way to gauge like the engineering scope as well as the engineering resources that we have, as that's something that the team lead would be best competent as well as best knowledgeable about how his or her team are behaving, how his or her team are available in a particular sprint, which at the same time, me, myself as the product manager would be chiming in more on like what are the priorities, what are the company goals that we are going after for. And with those 4 things merging together, then we can come up with a objective priority list and priority backlog for the team to tackle as well as plan for.
I see. Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. Yeah, when you do all those planning, and then do you also tie in some other typical KPI that you guys tie in as well into the decision making process? If so, what are those KPI?
Yeah, 100%. So the KPIs are usually tied towards the high-level goals that we are setting for the company-wide initiatives. As in, we don't set our goals as, for example, we want to achieve certain things. We want to be number one and call that a day. We always tie those with objective metrics behind them. So, for example, we are planning for Noir in next quarters is to begin the auditing of Noir itself. So one of the metrics then would be how many auditors have we screened at this current moment? How are we rating those auditors? Those would be some objective metrics that are tied to the auditing goal itself. And then there are also goals in terms of commercial growth. For example, do you want to see, for example, like 4 projects in the identity space regarding the adoption of Noir? Then that number would be an objective metric that we are going after for with respect to company goals. In terms of engineering scope, then we do have objective metrics, not necessarily numbers, but then, for example, we are going for an Noir 1.0 candidate that we'll be aiming for to bring into audit. So that scope of the engineering well defined in terms of a GitHub milestone of what are the features that we will be achieving with this particular milestone. Perhaps more importantly, what are the features that we will not be implementing for this particular milestone. So that would be a well-defined objective scope regarding engineering. And at the same time, we do have like performance targets that we are going for with the things that we are building as well. How should a particular library, how should a particular function behave in terms of performance, in terms of speed? So yeah, those are some of the things that will be laid out for the technical side as well.
I see. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think it's always good to tie in some metrics and make it relevant to each of the associated party as well. But when you have a new feature being raised up, do you actually write the specs? Are you the one writing the specs for those, or is it someone else?
Actually, me myself would be doing some of them. And sometimes I do count on the team leads to work on them as well, because we all have so many things to juggle between. The team lead is kind enough to offer his helping hand with some of the specs as well as at times I might be missing out simply because of how technical the product itself is as a programming language itself that involves compilers, that involves what we call ACVM, that is a particular VM for executing CK functions. As well as a lot of like different toolings that we have in terms of CLI, in terms of SDK. It's not usually, how should I put it? Like me, myself could be taking a first jab at these specifications as well, for sure. But then there's only so much that I am technically competent in terms of compiler development, in terms of a language development itself, that I might be missing things here and there. And I oftentimes would be discussing with the team lead and making sure the specifications is an executable one and is an engineering feasible one that the team could be taking on to avoid me myself writing something up in fancy ways that is actually not achievable or not really that good of a thing to be added into the language itself. So it's always about, of course, I will be coming up with like ideas and designs, but it's always about tight discussions as well as collaboration with the engineering to bring things into a successful attempt, I would say.
I see. Yeah, makes sense. I think that completely makes sense. But I think also important to have at first like the shot of the using the magic wand, right? Way the magic wand, being able to draw whatever you want, and then afterward let other maybe engineer, right? Maybe give him the real feedback. Like, hey, this is not technically feasible. We have to cut down, right? Yeah. So that I totally get that as well. Yeah, awesome. So I think we've been talking quite a lot. So I just maybe 3 more questions from my side. I want to be able to respect your time. One is that where do you see the future of like ZK? This is more like a general question. Where do you see the future where ZK, the whole ZK space, and and how Aztec will fit into all of that in the future?
For sure. I do see CK as a new paradigm of basically programming, particularly in terms of privacy programming, but also in provable programming. So we didn't have the time to go through like how CK works. So hopefully your audience will be able to catch up at this point. Pause this video right now and watch how CK works or CK 101 and come back to this podcast. But CK is basically a new way of doing programming, not just general execution or general computation that I'm computing 1 plus 1 equals 2, but the ability to actually prove that computation. At the same time, not necessarily refueling everything in between that computation to achieve privacy. That alone, how it comes to the bigger umbrella of programmable, what's it called? Arbitrarily programmable cryptography.
Composable? Are you talking about composable?
Programmable cryptography. So like traditionally, a lot of the cryptography are tied to specific use cases. For example, encryption, how we're using it in messaging apps like Signal, like WhatsApp. It's a particular implementation of encryption for this particular messaging protocol or particular messaging use case, where with the entrance of like CKPs and by extension FHE and by extension maybe certain parts of MPCs as well, a lot of technical terms, please Google them if you don't know.
Yeah.
With those entrance of technologies, it's opening up a new paradigm of programmable cryptography where people can actually work with these cryptographic primitives in a generally programmable way. So for example, using Noir, you can do a simple if-else, a for loop that is super comfortable and familiar with general developers. But at the same time, you're already tapping into the values and properties that CK offer of making that program provable, as well as making that program privacy friendly. And that then opens up a lot of opportunities and use cases that were never achievable before, not just for blockchain, but also in off-chain worlds. For example, on-chain worlds, I talked about how it opens up the spectrum of privacy, of how you can then do things in between. You can do private voting now on chain. You can then do identity verification now on chain. You can then do even we are talking with teams to do like Web2 oracles, how you can trustlessly prove certain information from, for example, a web page that you are visiting, a weather web page, your Twitter web page, your Instagram web page even, and bringing that information on chain through the use of zero knowledge proofs. And in the Web2 space as well, like how can we do identity verification without even pertaining users' data at all? Users can then actually generate, for example, an identity proof from their cell phones, from their computers, that prove their identity without passing on any personal information in between. That alone, as well as there are a lot of like discussions around CKML, a lot of discussions around how CK could be identity, CK gaming, things like that. A lot of different facets or initiatives that could be achieved with CK that weren't possible before. That's how we are foreseeing CK to come into existence. And with Aztec alone, it definitely opens up all the opportunities on Ethereum in a blockchain context in terms of privacy.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that world, right, where ZK will be universal in a lot of different applications, not only in Web2, not only in Web3, but also in Web2, right? Helping the world achieving privacy and many other amazing applications yet to come as well, or yet to be imagined as well at this point. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. What sort of advice can you give for people who want to break into Web3? Since you also come from the Web2 world original, right? And then you break into Web3, so maybe can you give some advice for people?
Oh yeah, for sure. It depends hugely on which route are you coming into Web3 for. Because I could definitely imagine like coming in from an engineering perspective could be very different from coming in, for example, in a business development perspective. So
Yeah,
depending on like your routes that you would like to aim for, there are different things to come into places. I will share about my journey particularly. That doesn't necessarily apply to everything, but I came in through the semi like technical routes of like first of all learning about software development for sure. The only software development training that I had during university was a introductory Python course, and that was pretty much it. I don't even know other languages. I don't even know how computer actually works. So a portion of my time that I was spending on was actually learning about how CS and software development came to be, as then well, the basics of learning how CLI works for sure, but also involves how memory works, how computer works, or algorithms coming into place, basically how CS works at a basic level, which then enables me to tap into more topic-specific learning that could come into place. I was particularly interested in CK, but then there are a lot of different facets of, I would say, blockchain engineering these days. There's smart contract development, there's blockchain infrastructural development, there's sometimes even technical economics as well. Like you are doing coding, but you are doing very economic related or social related engineering. So depending on like the use case or your passion that you would like to aim for, you can shoot for like one or two specific interests of yours to learn more about them, which then leads into contributions. I would say contributions is a great way for getting your working foot into the field. It's not easy to always land for a job straight ahead into the field, but if you can do like part-time contributions to different projects, that gets you the reputation as well as the friendliness from the projects that you might need to turn into something full-time, turn into a full-time commitment. Yeah, that could be a very feasible and possible ways for people to get into Web3 for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's very sound advice in general, right? Just learn about Web3, be excited, contribute, open source, and help other people. And one day network, and then one day poof, you're in. And final question: where can people follow you? And feel free to share any handle.
For sure. Everyone can follow me on Barcaster as well as Twitter. So
Okay.
I'm Savio on Barcaster, Savio. On Twitter, I am Savio_so, if I recall correctly. Just let me double check. On Twitter, I am Savio_so_. So SAVIO_SOU_. So that's my Twitter handle. But yeah, I usually hop between both Barcaster as well as Twitter these days.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll make sure to put your username in the show note. Also make it appear somewhere on the screen as well too, so people can follow you. And then once again, thank you, Savio, for taking such a time out of the day to be on the podcast today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today. It's been awesome.
Honored to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you. It's been awesome. And we're back to my studio. What do you guys think about this episode with Savio from Aztec? I think we touched upon many topics in this episode, including games, ZK, Aztec Labs, obviously, his company, day-to-day Web3 product manager, and advice for people who want to break into Web3. Let us know in the comment below what was your favorite part, or if you have any question, and both of us will try our best to answer. For the next episode, I'll be talking to Ryan Jones. He's the co-CEO and co-founder of Noom, a decentralized music streaming platform that directly connects artists with their supporters, removing the middleman and replacing them with code that is not as incentivized to make a profit. They are also building their product on the Cardano blockchain, and they're trying to disrupt the music industry. It's a very interesting conversation that you don't want to miss. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.